I look to my right, and to my right there is a being in a white robe, with light all around, a beautiful light, about 1 meter 75 tall, with brown hair and light eyes, almost blue. And when I look at him, and he gestures to me with his hand, and in front of me passes something like a series of frames, which are scenes from moments I have lived in this incarnation I'm in now.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
I'm here with Dr. Juan José López Martinez. He had a near-death experience, which places him in a select group of researchers who not only study the phenomenon, but have also lived it themselves. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate on your channel.
What happened at that moment when you crossed to the other side?
Well, at that moment I was in the hospital. It was in 2017. And like all strokes, it happened unexpectedly, suddenly. But from the very first moment, there was a sense of peace and control. At no point did I feel afraid, nor did I think I was going to die, or anything like that. I was a bit far from the emergency area of the hospital, and I walked very slowly because I couldn't walk at a normal pace, since my left leg wasn't cooperating. And I headed toward the emergency area. And in the emergency area, I arrived at a consultation room where one of my colleagues was. I opened the door to the consultation room, and there was a colleague of mine with a great deal of experience as a doctor, with more than 30 years in emergency medicine. And of course, when he saw me, he immediately became alarmed, because I had facial paralysis, which I assumed I already had. A facial paralysis and a deviation of the corner of the mouth, which is what appears in a stroke, in addition to hemiparesis of the left upper and lower limbs, in my case. Got up from his chair where he was sitting, took out the patient he had inside, who had a milder issue, and came over to me, sat me down on the examination table, and said, "Juanjo, what's wrong?" "Juanjo?" So I answered him, already with a lot of dysarthria. We know what dysarthria is, right? Dysarthria, when there's a stroke, is the difficulty in being able to speak properly. It's as if you were drunk. It's hard for you to pronounce words. When he asked me what was wrong, I told him I was having a thrombosis. Well, he told me, "Don't worry, don't get nervous." I told him, "No, I'm not nervous." He took me to the bed area, and when we got there wasn't a bed available for me at that moment. So he stood in front of me and said, "Listen, there's a chair behind you. I'll hold you." Immediately, 2 more doctors appeared, colleagues from the emergency department, and the 3 of them in front of me were quite nervous. The first one who saw me was explaining to the other 2, "Look at the symptoms. Look at the facial paralysis. Look at the drooping of the mouth, the hemiparesis in the arm. That's it." And at that moment, seeing how nervous they were, I turned to them and said, "Hey, don't get nervous. I'm going to get through this." And I was happy to hear that I no longer had dysarthria. I was speaking correctly. I heard it, but at the same time I noticed that they were still just as nervous. So I repeated the same thing to them again. "Don't get nervous. I'm going to get through this." And again I heard myself speaking clearly. And since I also realized again that they weren't hearing what I was saying, that's when I said, "They're not hearing me because I'm speaking from the soul." And when you speak from the soul, without doing it through the physical body, no one hears you. Or the vast majority don't hear you. So what happened? Well, I made a movement. Because at that moment, when I realized this, I said, "Where is my body?" So I looked to the left, and there was my body. In other words, on that couch, my body was to my left, and I was to its right. I moved backward and to the left and merged with my body, intending to say the same thing I had said, but this time through the body. Well, the surprise was that when I tried to speak through my body, I couldn't speak anymore. I mean, it's not that I had dysarthria, it's that I simply couldn't speak anymore. When I made the effort to speak and say the same thing, instead of speaking, all I could do was this. And this is what is called in medicine the pipe smoker's sign. The pipe smoker's sign, where you blow through here, indicates that the stroke is severe. Whether it's hemorrhagic or not, the stroke is severe. So with that information that I consciously obtained, because I didn't lose consciousness, I become aware of the situation and I know it's serious because I'm a doctor and I know what I'm experiencing. And at that moment, I left my body. So when I leave my body, I leave with the information I obtained. Through my consciousness, my conscious mind, and I pass that information on to the being I truly am. And the being we truly are is not the body we have. It's precisely what gives life to that body, which is what we call the soul, consciousness, and mind. Because one thing is the mind, soul, consciousness, mind, and another thing is the brain, conscious mind, and awareness. I left my body again. Being in that state of consciousness is when, with the information I have, I say, well, let's see, if it's hemorrhagic, I have 4 or 5 minutes left, and if the time has come for this body to end and for me to leave, then it's fine, I accept it. When you accept the possibility that you might die, the peace you feel in that moment, that truly is ineffable. There are no words to describe it. So let me make a parenthesis here. What I'm going to tell from now on happened all at once. Logically, I can't tell it all at once. I have to hold on. First one thing, then another, and then the next. Basically, there are 3 situations, but I insist, everything happened at the same time. When I'm there thinking, well, if it's hemorrhagic, I have 4 or 5 minutes left, because it had already been over 30 minutes. And I accept the possibility of death. I accept that I might die and that I have to go. At the same time that I'm saying that, at the same time that I'm thinking that, I tell myself, wait a minute, but I can't go. No, I can't go now. No, I can't go now because I still have so many things to do. I have to keep spreading this knowledge. All this about death existing, of course it does, but it's not the end. This knowledge that what apparently seems like we are human beings, we are not human beings. We call ourselves human beings on this plane, but in reality, we are spiritual beings incarnated in physical bodies. And all this knowledge needs to be spread. I remember at that moment, I have to spread it, write more books, attend more conferences, give more lectures. Well, at the same time that I'm saying this, I insist, it's really hard to convey, but I insist, at the same time that I'm saying all of that, I look to my right, and to my right there is a being in a white robe, with light all around, a beautiful light, about 1.75 meters tall, with brown hair and light eyes, almost blue. And when I look at him, and he gestures to me with his hand, and in front of me passes something like a series of frames, which are scenes from moments I have lived in this incarnation I'm in now. They go by at an incredible speed, but interestingly, I am able to see them calmly and in full detail. Because I, as the being that I am, soul consciousness, am faster than that. I can see it calmly. And it goes by at an incredible speed, but I can see it, I insist, in every detail. Well, when I've seen it, he says to me, he asks me, did you see it? I say, yes. He says, well, none of that is important. They are only experiences you have to learn from, and that you chose to come and live. And at the same time, behind me, I hear a voice with complete clarity and precision. First, I feel an incredible presence, an immense energy, with a beautiful vibration. Look, I start talking about it now and the camera can't capture this, right? But when I remember it, and it's already been 8 years, I still get goosebumps, as they say. Well, that vibration I felt, which I feel every time I mention it, from that being who stood behind me, I imagine it as enormous. And I say I imagine because I didn't turn around to see it. And I say I imagine because I also didn't have the ability for 360-degree vision at that moment. Others who have gone through clinical death have experienced this. I didn't go through clinical death. I stayed at the threshold. Because sometimes I think, when I reflect on this, I say, near-death experience. Where is it near? Is it before death? Is it during death? Where is the nearness? Because one is just as close as the other, right? So from that being behind me, two words come out that he says to me. And he says to me, you decide, based on that confidence and that certainty. At that moment I said, very well, since I decide to stay. Because I have many things to do, but my physical body has to be absolutely healthy now. When I say now, my 3 fellow doctors who were in front of me grab me on my left side and take me to the bed that was there. 2 doctors appeared, colleagues, neurologists, who were the ones that had been called to see me. When one of them arrives, clapping her hands like this, she says, but let's see, what's going on here? Because I have to examine him. So I turn towards her. Standing up, I turn to her and say, should I lie down with my clothes on or should I take them off? And my colleague, who was holding my arm, shakes me and says, Juanjo, you're speaking properly. You don't have dysarthria anymore. Now I was speaking from my body and I was speaking correctly. That's when I became aware of it. I realized what was happening and I said, hey, let go of my arm. I can move my arm now. I can move my leg now. I undressed and lay down. Of course, my colleague examined me, well, thoroughly. They explained to her what they had seen and said, the 3 of us saw it. And he also kept saying, I have a thrombosis, a stroke. And then she turned to me and said, listen, Joanjo, if I hadn't just heard what I did, what they just told me, I would tell you, look, get up, get dressed, and go home because there's nothing wrong with you. Given this, I have to admit you and run some tests. And that's how it happened. That's how I was admitted. I stayed for 5 days. They examined me. You can't even imagine. Thoroughly. And they ran all kinds of tests. And there was no trace at all that I had suffered a stroke. That was in July 2017. And well, there are several conclusions, right? The first is that my near-death experience in 2017 was a gift for me, because I had already spent 20 years working on and researching this. I had spent 20 years searching for the answer, right? What happens at the moment of death? I had already realized, back in 2002 or 2003, that the answer I was looking for was held by the soul, not by the body. There are 2 main players present at the moment of death, the physical body and the being that I truly am, what we call the soul or soul consciousness. So what happens then? Well, I thought I have to look for it. The way to reach the soul and ask it what happened at the moment of death was through regression therapy or transpersonal psychology. Call it whatever you like. But that was the path, because when the patient in this therapy relives a past life, I never end the session until they have also relived the death in that past life. And now, after having seen more than 3,500 people, Yes, regression. And considering an average of 3 regressions per person, well, you multiply that and see what you get. But honestly, the numbers don't matter to me anymore. I mean, I'm not here to break any records. But it's true, it's a fact. I've seen more than 3,500 people from different religions, different cultures, different social backgrounds. When they relive the death in a past life, all of them, and when I say all, I mean 100%, tell me the same thing. They're talking about seeing their body, seeing a light, or beings of light. When they reach the level of the light, they all have a problem, which is ineffability, the difficulty they have in finding the right words to explain in a reasoned, logical way, even with scientific methodology, what it is they're seeing and what they're experiencing. In other words, consciousness, the soul consciousness, is explaining to you the death of that past life. Because the one who was there at that death was the being I truly am, the soul consciousness that I am now. Yes, which was in a body before this one, yes, different from this one, yes. And I was there. I know what happened.
You are one of the pioneers in regressive therapy in Spain. I'd like to ask you, did you also undergo regressive therapy? And what can you tell us about your past lives?
I was a very, 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 very rational person. I kept trying to see if I could go into regression, because the patients I was already seeing, they were able to go into regression, and I became very interested. From where I live in Spain to the center of the country, to the capital, it's 450 kilometers. So, for 10 consecutive Tuesdays, I changed my hospital shifts, freed up my Tuesdays, and when Tuesday came, I would get in the car at 6 in the morning, and by 10:30 I was in the capital, in Madrid, right? And I would undergo the therapy. And I wouldn't go into regression. I was doing 900 kilometers Tuesday. Well, on the 11th attempt, I finally got in. And I went from nothing to everything, because those of us who are very, very, very rational, we ourselves are making it harder. Our soul lives the experience just the same, but we are so rational that we don't want to see it. The circumstances I was living here and didn't understand, both on a family and professional level, I was able to understand, because they were the consequence of circumstances that had happened in previous lives. And when you live through that and understand it, you discover that forgiveness fixes everything. It's enough to forgive or to ask for forgiveness on a soul level, and with that, everything is resolved.
Hi, I'm Paul Perry. I just finished re-releasing a book I wrote with Dr. Raymond Moody in 1990. The book is called Reunions. I want to thank AJ Parr for helping with the technical aspects of doing this book, doing the layout, and he had great advice on how to do a new cover, which he did, and it's beautiful. And all the technical aspects of reissuing a book and how to use Kindle Direct, which is a wonderful service, and communicating with Kindle Direct. But he was also more than that, moral support. He would read through the book, he would fact check, he did proofing for the book, and he made a number of really brilliant suggestions for editorial changes. So I highly recommend working with AJ Parr, and I'll be doing more books with him in the future. So thank you, AJ. I'll be dealing with you a lot more.
If you're interested in publishing your book in Amazon, contact me, and my publishing team and I will lend you a friendly hand. Send your email to ajparbooks@gmail.com. That's ajparbooks@gmail.com.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.